One thing I will say is Google's really good about like helping you out with your ads. You always have somebody that's dedicated to your account that you can talk to that can work with you on your keywords and negative keywords. Negative keywords has been a huge one for us because we were coming up for like free wedding venue and cheap wedding venue. Like we're not expensive, but you're also not renting our place for $1,000. Sorry.
Yeah.
Most of the interactions that we were getting were from vendors, not from, brides or anybody getting married.
You're listening to the Venue RX podcast.
What's up, everyone? Jonathan here with the Venue RX podcast, and today we have another one of our venue owner series. These have been so much fun because we have a chance to kind of peel back some of the layers and talk to real venue owners who are, walking the talk, as the saying goes, and who are, day in, day out running their venues. And we're talking about everything from, how they got their venue started to what they're doing now as far as booking goes and marketing and sales and all of the different things. And so this has been really fun. I know I've really enjoyed it, and I know based on some of the feedback we're getting that you all are enjoying it as well. Today we have someone who actually has a venue out in Texas, and I love Texas. I was born and raised there, and we were just chatting about that before we popped on the air. But I'm really thrilled to welcome Stephanie Jordan to the show. Stephanie, thank you so much for being here today.
Sure.
Awesome. Well, I want to dive into your venue, the venue that you help manage, kind of talk about it a little bit. I love a good origin story. There's so many different ways that people get started in this industry. I just talked to someone a couple days ago who, their dad was a contractor. And so it was like a dream of hers to make it. And she was like, hey, Dad, can you help me make this happen? So that happens. There are people who build it from the ground up. East Coast venues, West Coast venues, it's so different. And I love hearing the background story. So could you give me a little bit about the background of your venue and then maybe even some background on you personally, how you got into the wedding and events industry?
Yeah, for sure. So we are a family venue. It's my in-laws that actually own it. But in 2014, they kind of just like handed everything over to me, let me take it over. And so they kind of deal with a little bit of the back end stuff, but my father-in-law is kind of one of our maintenance guys. My mother-in-law deals with some of the financial stuff. Everything else is on my plate. So when they bought the property in 2000, they were originally going to build a house on this property, decided to buy in a neighborhood and build somewhere else. And so then my father-in-law kind of turned it into his man cave / music venue. He had some friends that had a band. They wanted to come out and use the space for their band practice. And then they started bringing people with them, and then more people started showing up. And so it kind of turned into like open mic nights and small concerts and that kind of thing. And so then just as more people came out for the music, they started asking if they could get married and do birthday parties and stuff out here. So officially our first wedding was in 2003, but there was nothing on the property. They got married out in the field under some trees, and we built our first building in 2005, which has been expanded and expanded and expanded. And then about 2011, my husband and I actually got married on the property. I like to claim that was our first big wedding, which, isn't 100% true, but it's a good story. And that was kind of the point that a couple came to my in-laws and said, what if we actually try and turn this into a venue? Because you've done this, several times, people are asking for it. And so they kind of transitioned it into a venue, started, we finally had a website then, started kind of transitioning it, doing a little bit of advertising, a bridal show here and there. And then, in 2014, I took it over and we kind of started running with it a little more. We've added a ton more buildings and ceremony sites. And then actually the building that I'm in right now, we just finished last June. So we started building this during COVID, which was terrifying, but it finished in last June. And so we've been, a little over a year in this big building as well, which has been super fun. But yeah, I never planned on doing this at all. I totally fell into it just because of the family. They just kind of came to me, and the couple that had been running it, things were not going as well as they'd hoped. And they came to me and they said, you can either run it or we're probably going to sell it. And I was like, yeah, we'll give it a shot.
And this was your family who came to you and said this because they had someone else running it. Okay, got it.
Yeah. They were kind of running it as a partnership because my in-laws didn't have the time or the desire to run it as a venue. And so as they were they saw the other couple was kind of starting to move away from wanting to do it. they came to me and, if you want to do it, it's yours. If not, then we're probably just going to sell the property. But this was never my plan. I have a history degree and a law degree. That was my path. But this is probably almost worse hours, but way more fun. So
It's so true. It's so true. Just talking to entrepreneurs, and especially entrepreneurs in this space, there's this allure of working for yourself and making your own decisions and things like that, but you don't get to clock out for sure. Yeah. And that's kind of the fun of it, because you can clock out whenever you want, but it's always odd hours. And it's like, it's definitely a mixed bag as far as the experience goes. But for people who really like it, it works,
Yeah, absolutely. I finally had to start forcing myself to at least take one day off a few years ago, because I could feel the burnout coming, because I was working 7 days a week. And so now I only work 6 days a week. But it's kind of nice to have the schedule kind of all over the place if I need to take the morning off to go do something. But then I'm probably responding to emails at 9, 10 o'clock at night. So
it happens. Guilty. And our team, I know that we try to make everyone take a Monday off, because that reset period for sure. So I have a couple of questions then. In the process of this venue becoming, more of a family property, dad's hangout spot, music venue, it kind of was a number of different things before it became a wedding venue. Do you feel like you're known locally as being a wedding venue now? Have you kind of made that transition? Because it sounds like it's been 10, 15 years at least of time that's gone by where people have started to get married. So now has the reputation changed a bit more to a wedding venue, or are you still doing music events? Is it still being used for other things?
Yeah, we're pretty much exclusively just weddings and events, which I think hurts my father-in-law a little bit, because he still loves doing the live music. We're actually probably going to maybe start trying to sprinkle some in here and there, at least over the summers. But we really stopped doing, it was, it used to be every Friday night. It was bring guitar and a case of beer and let's have some fun, and the first few years when we kind of started transitioning to weddings, we definitely did have some people that would just kind of show up and be like, oh, I thought, it was an open mic night. No, this is a wedding. Please leave. I'm so sorry. But now, we still have our original crew that when we do live music still, we let everybody know. And, a lot of the old people still show up from when they did, 15 years ago. So that's a lot of fun. A lot of the musicians will come and they still know, bring that guitar case or, drum set or whatever, because there's probably just going to be kind of a jam session at some point. But we've definitely transitioned to just pretty much exclusively doing weddings and events now.
Was that shift met with any resistance at all? It sounds like people are still familiar with it. People still come and show up, but was there ever a negative side of that was kind of like, oh, you guys are changing, or, oh, this isn't like what it used to be like? Any sort of that vibe at all?
Not really, just because it was mostly, friends and family. So It never got to where it was huge. We never promoted the events or anything that we really did. Everyone kind of understood oh, you're turning it into a business now, so things are changing. Okay, great. That was fine. There were other, local spots that they could go and hang out and do the music thing and that. So I don't really feel like we ever really got any pushback on it, which was nice.
That's awesome. As you were going through this transition, and I know you're in Texas, and depending on where anyone listening or watching is from the country, permitting and some of these different things as far as working with counties and cities and townships are definitely different. But in Conroe, where you guys are, your address is located, did you have any hoops or a lot of hoops to jump through as far as transitioning into a more commercial space that you're using regularly for paid events?
So we got lucky in the fact that we're actually outside of Conroe city limits. So the only permitting or anything that we have to deal with is county stuff, which county's a little rural. So we get away with probably a lot more than what a lot of people could. Honestly, we kind of flew under the radar for a while, because for the most part, it was just, family and friends that were doing events here for several years. And then as we kind of started going out and getting some more outside events coming in, we did have the fire marshal show up one day, and he was like, we don't have you on our list anywhere. There's no information that you guys exist as a business. We're like, oh, really? Huh. okay. So he went through and, because of the way that we were built and it was my father-in-law's man cave, there were some questionable things that, we had extension cords just like strung across for string lights that were hanging on the ceiling and that. And he just kind of looks at it and goes, yeah, that can't be there. And so, but he was very, very, very nice about it. He just gave us a list and said, these are some things that at some point you're going to need to change. These are the things that have to be changed right now. These are the things that at some point need to be changed. And so gave us our certificate of occupancy and all of that. And they were super nice about everything. But and then we kind of got grandfathered in for a few things too, because the actual building had been built, years ago. Like our old building doesn't have fire sprinklers even in it because the regulations changed somewhere along the way because it went from a personal property to a commercial property. We kind of got grandfathered in and didn't have to have sprinklers in that building. Obviously in this new building we do. But yeah, so that was kind of nice too. But we definitely had the benefit of being outside of the city limits, because I know I have a friend that has a venue in the city of Conroe, and we have talked about all the hoops that she's had to jump through for different things. And so I am very grateful that we had significantly less to deal with.
Yeah, I was just going to say, anytime, like if I was going to open a venue, because we manage venues, we don't actually own them, we just manage them for other folks. And the advantages of being in an unincorporated area or being outside of city limits, it's definitely a lot. It's usually a little bit easier to deal with, less rules, less regulations. I would say for most parts of the country. California, again, different beast. But, like most of the time, it seems like that, or even buying an existing property that currently could have some of those pieces grandfathered in is totally huge. So what are you doing now as far as marketing goes? Because you're booking, and actually before we go into marketing, how many events do you book a year, typically?
On average, we do about 65 events a year.
Okay.
Which, because it's our family business and it was never really meant to be a business even, we never wanted to be super busy. We had one year, I think 2016, we did like 77 events, and we were like, okay, this might actually be a little too much because I'm the only full-time employee. Everybody else that works for us just works the events. Okay. So that was a lot to handle. But on average, it's about 65. Somewhere along the way, we transitioned from doing about 80% weddings, 20% parties to almost 50-50. Okay. And especially these last couple of years. I don't know if it has to do with something changed with COVID, or I don't know, but it's been about 50% weddings, 50% parties for us these past few years, which is interesting.
So when you're getting those, and that's a great number, are you doing primarily, is it weekends? Is it Friday, Saturday, Sunday on a couple of peak, seasonal dates? Or are you doing, a whole weekend experience type thing? Like what is the package like that you're offering to people?
So yeah, we just do one day. We don't have on-site lodging or anything. And so I haven't figured out a good way to do like a full weekend option. But it's mostly weekends. We, being in Texas, have kind of a split wedding season. So we don't typically get super busy in January, February, because we're Texans and we can't deal with the cold. So heaven forbid it's 30 degrees on somebody's wedding day, they would lose it. And then same thing, July and August. Nobody wants it to be 105 degrees on their wedding day and you walk outside and just like melt. So typically March through June is pretty busy. It picks back up in September, and then through December, we're busy. So I would say probably April and November are actually our two busiest months, October, March being, kind of the next two. So we have some weekends where we do 3 events a weekend. We have some it's 1, we have some it's not. But it's kind of okay. We like having those breaks. We decided not to do any sort of off-peak, pricing or anything to fill in those emptier dates because it's a nice little change. We can get projects done around the venue if we need to. We can take vacations if we need to, just catch up on stuff, have a minute to kind of breathe without just being constant, 24/7 essentially.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the advantages of that model. And when you can, even when you try to maximize the revenue, not booking out all those dates, there's definitely advantages to that because there's maintenance that needs to happen. There's, you need to resod an area or returf an area if you're using artificial turf. Different projects that you want to do, just additional things that you want to add on. It seems like you guys have done that quite a bit. And you can't do that. Like if you look at your calendar and you've got one wedding every weekend at least, and then you look at your weekdays and you're like, can we do it in 6 days? Like, can we make that happen? And it's a little nerve-wracking. You hope everyone shows up. And so, yeah, that's a really smart strategy. So let's go back to the marketing then. How are you getting the word out about your venue? How are you attracting these people? Are you using platforms like Wedding Wire, The Knot, like any sort of platforms that advertise the venue? Are you doing Google ads, Facebook ads, Instagram, social media, all that? What does your marketing look like?
So we've kind of switched things around a little bit just to kind of see what works best for us. When I took over in 2014, we kind of just like threw it all out there and just figure we'll see what works. So we signed up with The Knot, we signed up with Wedding Wire. We canceled with and this was obviously when they were still two separate companies. We canceled with The Knot pretty quickly because we had a bad experience with them. We held on with Wedding Wire until about 2019, then decided to cancel with them. We've been pretty consistent with Google ads for a while. We don't have a huge spend on that, but it's enough to get some extra, traffic onto the website and that kind of thing. Facebook ads, we typically do with like our open houses. If we have special like public events, that kind of thing, we'll do some Facebook ads, but it's not typically just like throughout the year. It's only for those specific events that we'll promote the events. Same thing with Instagram. It's really just those kind of specific events. And then we have a lot of word of mouth is still where we get the majority of our business. And then we have listings on some of the free sites too. Eventective has actually been pretty good for us getting Christmas parties and that kind of thing. We don't really get wedding bookings from there, but that's been surprisingly successful. And we don't pay for it. We just have the free listing. And then we let people come and do like video shoots and photo shoots and that kind of thing. So we got listed on Peerspace. And so that's just a little bit of extra income that can help fill in. It's typically weekdays. So if somebody wants to come and, rent the space for 8 hours on a weekday where we wouldn't normally have any other, anything else going on, I can just sit in my office and get work done anyway while they're here doing their thing. That's been a great thing for us. So we've kind of tried a bunch of different things. There's a few local things that we had tried as far as advertising. We never did anything print just because we already felt like, even starting in 2014, like people were pretty much moving away from print.
Yeah.
So we never really kind of focused on that.
I was going to ask about Wedding Wire, The Knot, because I've had mixed reviews. We've used them a lot. We've used them a little. We've stopped them. We've started them. So we've kind of experimented with them a little bit. And of course, I'm just talking here in the Southern California area. But what was behind your decision, or how did you make the decision to cancel with with Wedding Wire in 2019? And I'm curious about that because I think a lot of people, especially newer venue owners, and I'm even speaking for myself, like, in the last couple of years managing venues, you're like, let me give myself every chance possible to get all the leads, and so you really hope that the leads convert, but then you hope that the leads are like good leads also. So there's been some of that thought. How did you go about evaluating whether you wanted to keep the Wedding Wire?
So I went through, and because the cost was going up, we were trying to figure out if it was worth it. And so I went through and pulled every single lead from the year and looked at the time we only had the smaller building. We could only hold up to 125 people. I looked at their guest count that they had listed on their lead of how many people they were having, what their date was, kind of what their requirements were, all of that, and how many we actually booked from it, and figured out the percentage that we booked of all of the leads that we had gotten from Wedding Wire. And it was 0.8% of the leads that we got, we booked. Yes, that was the face I made. And it was actually right around this time of year. It was right before we were going to Wedding MBA. And at the time, Wedding Wire was still there. And so I scheduled a time to go and talk to somebody with Wedding Wire. And I said, okay, here, I had my spreadsheet ready. And I said, here's all the leads. I said, this is all the leads that we can't even accommodate because there's too many people. They want 200, 300 people. We can't even do that, And so I went through, I had it all separated out. And I said, this is what our booking percentage is. We had booked, I don't know, it was like 1, maybe 2 weddings that year. And I said, I don't understand why I would pay, at the time it was like $3,600 for the year, why I would pay this when I'm not getting anything out of it. That's a lot of money that I could put into something else that's going to give me a better booking percentage, right? And they said, oh, well, you should upgrade your listing. And I went, okay, bye. No,
Yeah.
that is not the answer.
Yeah.
So I
More
just
money
decided
at
that
something
was,
that's not working. Yeah.
yeah, please give us more money. That's the answer.
So is that, I wanted to ask you if you'd be willing to share a little bit about cost specifically. You said you're not spending a lot on Google Ads. What does that mean on a monthly basis? Just to give kind of the audience a feeling place of what the range is.
Sure. So I think our budget is $300 a month.
Okay.
So, nothing crazy. It gets us still, I get the analytics updates of how many, click-throughs we're getting to our website and that. And it's nothing crazy, but I feel like it's enough to get some extra traffic in there. We have had it going for several years. So we've done some work. That one thing I will say is Google's really good about like helping you out with your ads. You always have somebody that's dedicated to your account that you can talk to that can work with you on your, keywords and negative keywords. Negative keywords has been a huge one for us because we were coming up for like free wedding venue and cheap wedding venue. Like we're not expensive, but you're also not renting our place for $1,000. Sorry.
Yeah.
So we had to go through and, get out a lot of those things, different locations too. And so we've kind of gotten it narrowed down now to, I feel like, a pretty good point. And they're always changing things too. Now they have, everything's a reactive ad now. And so we do have to do a little bit of maintenance there, but that I feel like has been pretty easy, just kind of like running itself, which has been nice.
Totally. Yeah, we've loved using Google Ads. And it's interesting what you mentioned when you said 3,600 at the time for WeddingWire, like my face kind of reacted a little bit because it's closer to like $10,000 or $12,000 now.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I assume that's adjusted regionally, but that's pretty amazing. What do you feel the impact of Instagram has been on? Have you used TikTok yet?
So I actually just got signed up on TikTok like 3 weeks ago because I was talking to another venue owner and they were like, you have to get on TikTok. Like, these Gen Zers, that's where they're planning their weddings is on TikTok. You have to get on it. And I had held out for this long and finally decided that, okay, fine. So I'm trying. And I told her, I helped her with her contract. And so I told her, okay, next time we meet, you have to help me with TikTok because I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, it's definitely a beast. And all this stuff is always changing. It's like Pinterest and TikTok and Facebook and the Facebook groups, which is like a whole different beast. And so there's definitely a lot of plates to keep spinning. So you're doing your marketing and bringing your marketing in. Instagram, are you seeing a lot of traction from that? Like, is that kind of the part of the word of mouth piece? Like people mention the venue and then people go immediately to Instagram and check it out?
Instagram has not been helpful for us, really.
Okay.
Most of social media traffic is still coming from Facebook, it seems like.
Okay.
We pretty much everything, we actually have a marketing company that does social media posts for us on Facebook and Instagram now. We just started that actually in July. And so, everything that gets posted on Instagram gets posted on Facebook. And we don't see a lot of traffic from Instagram. It seems like, I don't know why, because that's why we hired somebody to do it, because I'm not good with the social media stuff. But it seemed like, most of the interactions that we were getting were from vendors, not from, brides or anybody getting married. So I'm sure there's something that we could do differently there, but.
Yeah. Stephanie, it's really interesting. Something that you just said now, which was kind of an interesting piece. You said two things. I know you have a law background, right? And then you mentioned you did the contract, you helped your friend with the contract. And then you also said, I'm not so great at social media stuff, so my friend's gonna help me, or we hired this company. And I love that because it's a classic example of someone, where you're kind of leaning into your strengths. You're leaning into the things that you can do really well, and then you're hiring out the rest of it. And I think that's so important because I'm good at very few things, actually. And like my goal is to try to surround myself with people who doing a really incredible job at whatever the specific trait or, avenue or whatever that they're working on, whether that's social media or contracts or whatever. And it's why I don't have a law background and we have a legal team and some attorneys who help us with that. Tell me about your contract and kind of putting together the inclusions for your venue, the rules, the regulations, the different things that you set. Were you the one who set those or kind of maybe overhauled them as you came into the picture in 2014 and just leverage your law background? Or did you work with a coach, a venue coach, or used a template or something like that to get you started with those things?
So when I took over, my in-laws and the other couple had hired an attorney to do a basic contract. And so then when I took over, I pretty much ran with that same contract, but I have lost count of the number of times I have updated it. Because one, you learn a lot of lessons along the way. So somebody does something stupid, oh, it's going in the contract now. And then obviously with COVID now, we have a clause in there for COVID. Being in Houston with Harvey, we had a wedding the weekend of Harvey. And so, now we have something in there that's a little bit more specifically geared towards, okay, if you've got a hurricane coming through the weekend of your wedding, here's what we're going to do for you. So we've definitely updated it a lot along the way. And I literally updated it yesterday because I was talking to my friend about something that she had a question about. And I told her, what I would do. And I was like, actually, that's a really good idea. I'm going to do that in mine too. And it wasn't something that had come up before as being an issue, but it's certainly not bad to have it in there. And we've tried to keep our contract pretty concise. That was something that I never wanted to do because I know people don't read things as it is. My contract is 3 pages and people still don't read it. So I've tried to keep it very, very simple. As much as I, have that legal background, I try not to use too much of the, legalese or anything like that. It's very plain English. There's nothing that hopefully nobody's going to understand. We've got 1 page that's kind of the basic, all the legal term, the force majeure clause and all of that stuff. But which now I think with COVID, everybody knows what that is. Because if you didn't already, you've Googled it now.
Yeah, exactly. No one knew about it. And then now everyone's like, yeah, it was definitely a hot topic of discussion for 6 months or a year or something.
Yeah.
What is your process like for booking? Are you using a CRM? Because of course you get the leads in, and then do you put them into a CRM? Are you using like a HoneyBook system or something like that? Or are you using spreadsheets? Like what's the process like when you take a lead and they kind of get in your system and start touring and things like that?
All right. So the first 5 years, it was all Google Drive. I had spreadsheets and documents and all kinds of things for all the things, right? And then I decided, okay, this is maybe a little bit too much. Let's look at maybe doing a CRM system. And so we actually signed up with 17 Hats. We did their Black Friday deal. It was like 2 years for, I don't remember, it was super cheap. And that was kind of all I wanted at the time, just somewhere that I could keep track of all my contacts and the bookings and all of that stuff. And then that was for 2 years. So then come towards the end of 2021 and we started looking at, maybe there's more that I actually want in a CRM now that I've kind of gotten my feet wet with doing it in 17 Hats. And so I started looking at other places, plus our Black Friday deal was up. So the cost per month was going up significantly. And so I started looking at other CRM systems and trying to find something that was a little bit more venue focused that could do more stuff for me. So we actually ended up signing up with Planning Pod in January. And then they only had like a 2-week trial. You had to like request the trial. It wasn't something that you could just like go in and sign up for a free trial. And so the more I got into it, the more I realized I really, really disliked it. There were just a lot of, I felt like UI issues that just made it very not user friendly. And so we actually ended up then, even though I signed for a year with Planning Pod, we ended up signing up with Weven in July. So I still have Planning Pod through January. So I'm kind of using that for all of the events through the end of the year, and then all the new people that are coming in and everybody else, for 23, 24 that we already had booked. I'm transitioning over into that system. Theirs is newer, and I still feel like there's some work that needs to be done. But it seems like they have a lot of things in the pipeline too. There's already things that, like, when I first talked to them, I said was a deal breaker for me that they've either already released or I know they're working on because they're talking about betas, and stuff like that. So I just, for what I want, I don't feel like there's a CRM that exists. So I have to kind of figure out, what's the best option for me and what are my, must-haves and what are my deal breakers. So, so far so good with them. I like the way the platform is set up. I actually had a meeting with one of them a couple of weeks ago they're trying to change up their dashboard. And so they were looking for feedback from people that had already signed up with them of kind of what they liked. And so I like that they're actually actively, trying to update things, listening to it's specifically for venues. So they're listening to their, venues and what their venues are looking for and what they're wanting. So gives me some confidence that, it's at least going in the right direction.
Totally. I feel like it's such an underserved market. And actually you're the second person that's talked to me about Weavin. And so now I 100% I'm going to be checking it out. And I'm curious because it seems like a lot of the different planning or like management tools that are out there are blanket enough that they're trying to accommodate DJs and planners. And there's so many things very specific to venues that aren't specific for some of the other vendors that it's hard to kind of shape and mold a CRM platform. And we've used Honeybook at the properties that we manage. And it's been good, but similar to you, there's kind of been like, there's some things that are missing. And so I don't know, we'll see. But now I'm going to check out Weavin. So, this is great. And honestly, this is what this podcast is about because, we're sharing ideas, we're talking back and forth. People get to listen and watch this on YouTube and get this information, kind of do this research vicariously through you, get exposed to Weavin. I learn about it through different people, and it makes the whole industry better. So I'm really excited about that. I have a couple more questions that I want to ask. How do you handle alcohol on your property? Because I know that's always a big, topic, and how people choose to allow it, whether it is, something that the bar is provided by the venue or whether a catering company provides it and there's a partnership. How do you guys handle it?
So we have transitioned several times throughout the years. When we first started out, it was, BYOB. We don't care who serves it or if anybody serves it. If you want to put a trough out there with a bunch of beer in it, cool, And then we started requiring, it's still BYOB, but it has to go through bartenders. And you have to hire your own bartenders. And then we brought the bartenders in-house, but we were outsourcing to a company. And then we actually hired them on as employees. And then just this year, we actually got our liquor license. So now we are providing all of the alcohol. Everything goes through us. So wow. We just got it in February, actually. So that's brand new, pretty much.
Wow. That's so cool. Steffi, can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, what was the process like? Because there was a lot of evolutions there that you just mentioned. And I know all of our listeners, if you own a venue or you manage a venue, you're somewhere in that timeline. Let's go to the liquor license, actually getting that. Can you tell us a little bit about that process? What was it like getting your liquor license?
So we actually hired a company to kind of do everything for us, which was the best investment, because if you actually go and look at like what all you have to do to even apply to get your liquor license, you have to get people from the city and the county to sign off on things. You have to send letters to your neighbors. It's a whole process. So we hired somebody to do it, which made it very easy. It was something that we had been talking about for years and years and years, and we really just never did. But with TABC, they actually switched their systems. So now they're actually issuing licenses a little bit faster than they used to be, which is nicer. And we got it in February because, again, that's kind of our downtime. And we didn't know exactly how long it was going to take once we applied to actually get the license. So we planned it. We applied at the end of November, beginning of December, expecting that it would be sometime in that January, February timeframe that we would get it. And that way, by the time the March rush hits, we'll be ready to go with the license, which is pretty much what happened. It was a little bit crazy because we actually got issued the license on a Wednesday and had an event that Friday that wanted a full open bar. And so thank goodness I have a truck, and I went to, the liquor store that we were doing wholesale with, and loaded up my truck with $8,000 worth of alcohol because I had no idea what all we needed, how much we were going to go through. I was like, I'm just going to buy all the things. So wow. I still have like a case and a half of Bombay that we haven't even opened because I thought people were bigger gin drinkers than they are. They're not, apparently. No.
It's such an interesting thing. It's all about the crowd. Sometimes you have, big cake eating crowd and no one drinks, or like everyone's drinking so much and the beautiful cake they spent all the money on is just sitting there. So tell me a little bit more about that, because I'm curious. So how much, do you remember about how much it was to hire that company, or kind of like the all-in cost?
Yeah, so it was like $2,000,
Oh,
which,
wow. Super reasonable.
super affordable for everything that they did for us. And anytime I had a question about anything, I could send them a question and they would get right back to me. And it was fantastic. They kept me updated along the way of, okay, we've submitted everything to the TABC. It'll take about this long, here we've got, here's your update today. It was absolutely wonderful. The license itself was like $6,600. And then in Texas, you've got bonds that you have to do, and which that's yearly for the first couple of years. So actually, we just got our renewal for that a couple of weeks ago. So, but yeah, hiring that company for $2,000, absolutely hands down worth it.
So if I'm just doing my math right, $2,000 plus the $6,600, we're at like $8,600. Then there's some bonds. Is that another $2,000 or $3,000? Something like that.
It was like a $7,500 bond, I think. But I don't remember. My mother-in-law dealt with that, so I don't remember the specifics of what we had to pay when with that. But
okay, so maybe all in, if we could just give everyone a ballpark, $10,000 is kind of
around there
with help with. And what was the total time?
It was about 2 months, about 60 days.
Okay, huge. So $10,000 in 60 days, hypothetically, give or take a little bit. That's great.
Right.
That's super interesting. So tell me about the package. We talked about that very briefly, but this is just kind of where I want to, and actually I want to ask a question about team, and then we'll wrap up today. But the packages that you have, I know you said you do, you will send the individual dates, but you're not looking to max out the calendar. What do people get when they book with you? Tables, chairs. Sounds like there's an alcohol component that you now require them to go through you for. But decorations. Is it all inclusive, or they can bring their own caterer? Give me some more of the specifics around booking at your place.
Yes. So we wanted to keep it super flexible. So we have a venue only option, which is tables and chairs. And then, they can choose their bar package. And then we do have all inclusive. That all inclusive is going to include pretty much everything that they need outside of photographer minister, because we never wanted to pick those for everybody. But it includes the DJ, a bride's cake, catering, linens, flowers, a day of coordinator, some extra decor options. So they can pretty much walk in on the day and everything is decorated. They bring a guest book, some photos, and it's done. But then we customize too. So if somebody has a caterer or a DJ that they already want to use, but they want to use our linens and day of coordinator or something, we'll customize to be anywhere in between as well. So that was one of the things that we really wanted to do. We didn't want to stick people into having to be all inclusive, but we also didn't necessarily want to require people to just rent the venue and do everything on their own, because there's so many people that don't have the time to do it. You got to meet with 4 different DJs and 6 different caterers, and we essentially just handed them a package and said, okay, here's everything that we can do for you. With the flowers, we use a florist, so it's all real flowers, and they go in and meet with that florist. They just have a budget they have to stick with. So there's a lot of flexibility there for what they want. Same thing with the cake baker. They get to choose their flavor, their decoration style. So there's a lot of flexibility there too. With their DJ, they go through all the music. So that was one of the other things too, is we wanted to make sure it was still very specific to what they want. Because I remember for my wedding, before we decided to get married here, because it was actually too small for the guest count we were having, we ended up having to get a tent. We had gone to look at a couple other venues, and one of our colors was red. And they were like, oh, great, here's your centerpiece. And I was like, ooh, I don't really like that. And they were like, well, this is our red centerpiece. Okay, but do I have another option? You're like, nope. Okay, not doing that. Yeah. So we wanted to give it, still that customization to where it really feels like their event and not just, same as everybody else's.
Totally. Okay, I love that. The amount of flexibility that you get, because it is tough. You're all inclusive, and you might make some more money by doing catering and doing some of those different things, but you do put people in a box for sure. Makes it easier on the venue, but doesn't allow for as much creative expression from the couple. So that's cool that you really have both of those options. As far as your team goes, I know you mentioned, you're running the venue. You said your father-in-law is, involved a little bit. He's the maintenance guy. Tell me a bit about the other team members that are there. Set up, tear down people. Do you have anyone else who tours the property or responds to leads? Do you have a VA? Like, give me kind of a better picture of who all is involved on the property.
Sure. So we have a handful of people that work the events for us, our event staff, because we've always got people, that are on site, and they take out the trash during events. We do all the cleanup afterwards. They take care of all that. They get here like an hour before ceremony. They're here till the very end. Bartenders, obviously, we have a day of coordinator if people want to add that on. And then some of our event staff also doubles as setup. So we normally have one person here. Our rentals are 17 hours. So it can be a long day. So we typically have a split. There's a setup person here from, before the couple gets here until an hour before ceremony. And then that's when the event staff comes in. We try to keep a very small staff because we're not super consistent, year round with events. So we want to make sure people are getting enough hours. It's a part-time job for everybody. Everybody that works for us has something else going on. I do have somebody that does tours for me, just pretty much just on Sundays. So I can kind of have maybe a second day off, depending on, what those tours look like. It's my mother-in-law's sister though. So she just, does it because it's something for her to do. Even though she tells us not to, we pay her a little bit for it. So gives her a little bit of extra income. And then we have a cleaning lady that we contract out, and she comes in and cleans the whole venue for us in between events and that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We keep it, pretty tight. I think we've got about 10 people that are on the payroll, pretty much between staff and bartenders, and then our setup people. I try not to be the ones on the day of doing anything. I try to have other people doing it so that I can focus on other things. But that doesn't always happen, especially with the small staff. If somebody calls in, there is no backup. So I bartended a wedding a couple of weeks ago because one of my bartenders had a migraine. So that was, I hadn't bartended in a while.
It's pretty awesome though, because you kind of you get reconnected. There's that rush for sure. You get the guests, walking up to you. You're kind of in the moment. Okay, where, you're trying to sell that gin, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Are you sure you don't want Bombay in that?
Sure you don't? Yeah, this would be really good with gin in, I promise. That's super cool. The way that you described that with the team members was not, it didn't really seem like you lacked confidence. And of course, we're here on the podcast, but I'm mentioning that specifically because I think a lot of people really like the concept of having employees and having other people that they're responsible for is really daunting. And so if you were going to give advice to someone who maybe is just doing everything, maybe there's 3 people involved, maybe it's a mother, father, daughter team, and you're thinking about bringing that first, second, third person on, what advice would you give? Because you're running a team of like 10 people, and you just were like, yeah, we have about 10 people, and we try to keep it. What maybe words of encouragement could you give to make it a little bit less scary, or is it scary? Give me a little bit of your experience with that.
We've had good experiences and bad, with anything. When we first started bringing employees on, we definitely we were trying to do people that we knew. It was friends and family members. Our cousin worked for us for a while. That's not always the best idea. I tell my husband all the time, he's the worst employee we have. So it's worked out better for us to bring in outside people, and then just training. That's been the biggest thing. Train them well to begin with, and you will never have a problem. So that's been our biggest thing. One of my girls has been with me for like 6 years. I don't have a single concern when she's here because I know she's going to take care of it. And if there ever is something that's, out of her wheelhouse, she'll call or text me. So that's another thing too, is making sure that they know that, just because they're here and I'm not, if there's a problem, don't hesitate to let me know. Yeah. Which, is pretty rare because they kind of know the drill. But it's also been really nice to be able to not have to be here all the time. I don't always have to have an 18-hour day on a wedding day. It's really nice. So, the interview process is important for sure too, just to kind of get to know the personality of the people too. That's one big thing for us, is I want to make sure that the people that I'm hiring are fitting in with everybody else. And so because we are such a tight-knit group.
Yeah, you can't just have someone who's, completely outside of the experience level maybe of everyone else, outside of some of those things where you're going to constantly have to be pushing them or trying to get them there. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. Well, Stephanie, I want to wrap up with my last two questions. Let's start with the worst and let's end with the best. What's your least favorite part about owning the venue, operating the venue, managing the venue, and then what is your most favorite part?
I feel like there's one answer for both, and it's the people.
Okay.
Because I feel like you get, for the most part, we're doing weddings and parties and the people are happy and it's wonderful. And, we get so many compliments on how beautiful the property is and all of that stuff. And then at the same time, you have the people that, do you do this kind of stuff at your own house? Like, we don't have a paved parking lot. We have crushed concrete, and then we've got a lot of grassy areas. Oh, and okay, it just rained 3 inches and you decided it was a good idea to park in the grass. And now we have these huge ruts everywhere. Do you want me to come park in your yard? So I feel like that's kind of both ways. My husband hears it all the time, how much I complain about just how disrespectful people are of being on somebody else's property. The cigarette butts that get thrown on the ground, even though we have ashtrays everywhere. The parents that think that the staff is just the babysitters, and so they just let their kids run wild. We have a 2-acre pond too. Yeah. And so my husband actually had to pull a kid out of a pond because all the kids were running around outside. There was no parent, and the little ring bearer just right in the pond. Luckily, my husband was there to grab him out. But if he hadn't been, so I just feel like people are so disrespectful of other people's properties. It's crazy to me. That's definitely the most frustrating thing, I feel like, is dealing with people. And then, the couple knows the rules, but the guests don't know the rules. So with our liquor license, you cannot bring in outside alcohol. And we see people coming in with flasks and bottles and a cooler. You can't do that, So yeah, but at the end of the day, it is fun dealing with all the people, planning their weddings, planning these parties, doing all of that stuff. It is fun to see how happy people are and all of that stuff. But, I tell my husband all the time, I hate people. And he just laughs. He's like, you're in the wrong industry then.
Totally. Well, and it's a love-hate relationship. And I totally get that because you see the worst for sure. You see the entitlement, you see all of that. And then you also see the best. You see the love, you see the attention to detail, the care, you really see quite a mixed bag, the excitement, the joy, and you're getting people together, and that's always kind of crazy. You got people who haven't seen each other for a long time and so many different dynamics, and it's very integral to who we are, I think, as like a species almost, just this gathering piece. So that's really cool to hear. Well, Stephanie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. If people want to connect with you personally or check out the venue and kind of understand a little bit more about, TownHall and what you're doing over there, where should they be connecting with you?
Yeah, so since I'm the only full-time employee, if you call, text, email, fill out the contact form, it's all going to me. Cool. So whatever's easiest, send me a Facebook message, Instagram DM, whatever. On TikTok now, so I guess you can message me there, I think.
It's definitely up on TikTok.
Enough.
I love that.
Don't judge my TikTok videos. They're not good. But and I'm an open book. So I'm more than happy to help out. If people have questions about things, I will tell you all the nitty-gritty details, the good, the bad, the ugly, especially people that are just getting into it. My friend I talked about that we worked on her contract. There was something I suggested she put in there, and she was like, really? I said, oh yeah, just wait till the one time that you have it happen and you're going to be real glad that it's in your contract.
What was that?
I'm happy to help.
What was the topic? I actually wanted to ask you earlier.
So we had somebody, we have in our contract that your event can go as late as midnight, and then you have an hour afterwards as late as 1 a.m. to pack up. And that's the only thing it said was, you have it until midnight and then 1 a.m. to pack up. We had an event that ended at like 9 p.m. and they were like, well, we have the venue till midnight, so we're just going to sit here and hang out and drink. And I was like, that's not really how it works. So now my contract says you have an hour after your reception ends, not necessarily an hour after midnight. And that's what I told her too. They actually ended 11. And so I told her, I said, you need to make sure that it doesn't just say you have to be out by 12. You need to make sure it says by 12 or an hour after your reception ends, because at some point there will be somebody that takes advantage of you and says, well, you said I have it till 12, so I'm going to sit here, even though my reception ended at 7, I'm going to sit here for the next 5 hours and get my money's worth.
That's so crazy. That's such a good point. At one of our properties, that's happened a couple of times where the party just like the guests just leave a little early. It kind of just wraps up and then it's done. And people are like, well, we've got a couple more hours. And you're like, it's not totally like that. So wonderful advice, Stephanie. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. And yeah, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Well, for anyone, if you're checking us out on YouTube, you can also listen to this on podcasts. And if you are listening on YouTube, I would love if you subscribe. We're running some analytics, and over 70% of the people who listen and watch online are actually not subscribed. And we are trying to grow the channel. So if you would do us a solid and consider subscribing. And yeah, I think that's it for today. We'll see everyone in the next episode.